Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to be doing a book review on the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series by Rick Riordan. If you guys don't know, Percy Jackson and the Olympians is a very, very popular middle grade series. It follows a boy named Percy Jackson. At the beginning of the first book, this one, you find out that Percy Jackson is not completely human. You find out that he is the son of a god, and so he has to go to a camp called Camp Half-Blood and be trained to be able to protect himself from monsters that will continuously attack him throughout the course of his entire life. I'm going to keep this review spoiler-free for the entire series, so you don't have to worry about that. I haven't completely written out all my notes yet, so we're just going to hope that I can pull this together and make this a coherent video. If you guys are interested in me doing a more spoilery discussion video on the series, let me know that and I can pull some notes together and make that happen. But in this video, we're just going to be talking about some pros and cons for the series in general, as well as some of my thoughts on each book individually. So to start off with, we're just going to be talking about the series in general. My first pro for the series is just the main character, Percy Jackson. He is so easy to fall in love with and to root for. He has a very strong relationship with his mother, and he will do anything and everything to protect her. In this book, really the impetus for him going through everything that he goes through is to try and save his mom. So I really just love Percy. I'm so invested in him. I've read this series twice all the way through. I've read this book 3 times. I've read the Heroes of Olympus series and some of the books in the Apollo series. So he's just someone that I really, really enjoy. He's such a good person, but he's not a perfect person. So I think that he's very relatable. And it shows because this series is so popular that so many people just love Percy. So he's a big pro for the series as a whole. Another pro for me personally is that I love the humor in these books. It's very dad joke-ish, which I really appreciate. I think those jokes are hilarious. A lot of the characters give each other hard times and joke a lot, and I just love it. I love the different jokes in here. So when I'm reading these books, it makes me laugh out loud, and it's just a blast. Another pro for this series overall is that I think that the mythology and the stories that are woven into the series are done so well. He includes a lot of minor details from the myths in here, and I really, really appreciated that. My go-to thing when I talk about this is that in the second book, there is a part where a character is unraveling something that they're making, and it is a retelling of Penelope from the Odyssey, who is Odysseus's wife. A lot of suitors are trying to marry her, and she is having to make her burial shroud. She wants to prolong that process as long as possible, so she unravels it at night to make it seem like she is making progress during the day, but then she still has a long way to go. That's retold in the Sea of Monsters, and if you didn't know that myth, you wouldn't pick up on it, but I loved all those little details, and they're just flawlessly interwoven into the series. But with that being said, there are a lot of well-known myths that are in here as well. You will see Medusa, and you will see the Fates, and you will see the Furies, and mythological beings like Chiron are in here as well. So there are a lot of well-known things, and there are also a lot of smaller details as well. So overall, it's just completely well done. Moving on. This series is action-packed. There is always something happening. I don't think that I was ever bored while reading it. The characters are always having to go up against something or someone and try to figure out how to get out of that situation, and it's just non-stop, and I love it for that. And because it is so action-packed, I find it completely entertaining. I read through these books so quickly on this reread. I read them as they came out, and I just went back and reread the whole series in a week or something like that because they are so gripping and fun. Another thing that I find that's funny in these books is that there are a lot of pop culture references. So because the books are a little older now, the references that they're making are a little older. I think in this book, it has a reference to Hilary Duff, which she's still around, and they just announced recently that there was going to be a reboot of Lizzie McGuire, so maybe kids will know who she is and what these references are referencing, but I think that they're really funny going back and seeing what was common and present and what people were talking about and consuming when these books were being written. And my last pro that I'm going to talk about for the series as a whole is that I just love all the messages that are in this series. There are so many themes and good messages for young readers to read and pick up on and, emulate in their own lives. There's a big theme of friendship in here. Friendship is super important. There's a big theme of family and how important family can be. And so I think that the series has a lot of value for kids in that regard as well. All the demigods are children that are half mortal, half immortal. All the demigods have ADHD, so there is some ADHD representation throughout the series, and the representation and the diversity of this series grows as the series goes along. So this one probably has the least amount of representation, and then as the series goes along and you get into the Heroes of Olympus series and the Apollo series, which is behind me, there's a lot more representation introduced, and so I really like that. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of cons for the series as a whole, and then I will go through each book and kind of talk about each one. My first con, which is not really a con, it's more of an aside, is that the humor is very present. There's a lot of jokes all the time. So if you don't like dad jokes, I don't think that you'll really like this series, and I think that that's one of the things that people have to just figure out for themselves. This series is not going to be for everyone. No book or series is. So if you don't like the humor, I would not tell you to keep going because you're probably not going to enjoy it. So I guess that works in my favor because I really like it. But if you don't like that humor, you're not going to enjoy the series. So keep that in mind. Another aside, which is not really a con, is that I listened to the audiobooks my second time around. So I've reread this one and this one twice, and I listened to the audiobook of all of the books, and they're okay. Like, I think that physically reading them is a better experience, but that's just my personal opinion. So if you want to listen to them on audio, they're fine, but I do think that reading them is the way to go. Speaking of just versions of this story, there are a lot. So there is the regular novel, there is the graphic novel version, which is right here. So there's a graphic novel version of the first book as well. And there's also an illustrated edition of the novel. It's like enormous, it's like this big. But if you want to have a lot more pictures, then there's that one if you want to check it out. That had nothing to do with audiobooks, or cons, but I wanted to throw that in there. My next con that I kind of touched on already is that it's beneficial to be familiar with the myths already. Like I said, you're not going to pick up on all of the minor details if you don't already know the myths. That could just be like benefiting people that already know the myths and will pick up on those things. But if you want to pick up on those things, it pays to go and find the versions of the mythologies and read them. It just makes it so much more enjoyable if you already know the myths. And keep in mind that there are different versions of every story. So there's different versions of Medusa. Like Medusa in the original myth was always a monster. And then there's a version of Medusa where she was a mortal human and then got turned into Medusa. That's the one that's in here. So just know that when you're looking into these different mythologies, there's a lot of different versions. And also know that mythology, like timelines, are not really a thing. So a lot of stuff you're just going to have to accept when going into the mythology, as well as in this series. For example, when Athena is born, she's born out of Zeus's head. Hephaestus cuts her out of Zeus's head using an axe. But in Greek mythology, he's not born until after Athena. So it doesn't really make all that much sense when taken together. So there's just some stuff like that that you're going to have to suspend your disbelief of. But it does benefit you to read the myths. And that's all the cons that I really had for the series as a whole. I have a couple of cons here and there for the individual books, but I rated all of them 5 stars when I first read them, so I left all their 5-star ratings when I reread them. So now we're going to talk about the books individually. Just a couple of thoughts that I had on each one, which ones were my favorites, stuff like that. So for this one, I really loved the themes of friendship in here. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends in the first book, so he's very isolated and very lonely. In this one, he starts to get friends. He starts to kind of form this found family around him. And so I really liked seeing that throughout this story. Again, it's just the beginning of Percy Jackson's story, so I just have a large amount of love for this first book. But there were a couple of things that I noticed this time around that I didn't either pick up on the first time I read it or didn't care about. The first thing is that I didn't realize how info-dumpy this first book can be. Every time you meet a character, you get a rundown of what they look like and their stats and everything like that. It didn't really bother me this time around, but if you're reading it for the first time, there are some info dumps, so know that. My only other con that I have written down for this book is that I didn't really love what happens in the ending. I don't want to spoil anything. I don't like what happens with Gabe at the end of this book. I think that how it's done is kind of out of character for the character that does it. When I was excited to reread this book, I didn't remember that that happened. And so when I read it again, I was like, ooh, I don't think those characters and that character would do something like that. So it kind of threw me out of the story. but I don't want to go into any more details other than that because I don't want to spoil you. But those were my only 2 cons for this. With the Sea of Monsters, I think this might be the shortest book in the series. A lot of people say that this is their least favorite in the series, but I definitely disagree. I think that this one holds up just as well as any of the other books. In this one, we're introduced to a character named Tyson, and I just love Tyson so much. Tyson is such a great character. I love that in this book, we get to explore a lot of Annabeth's weaknesses, and seeing her and Tyson interact was really interesting, and is interesting as they interact throughout the rest of the series as well. In this one, it has a lot of things like judging a book by its cover, or how stereotypes can be dangerous if they're taken to be a truth about an entire group of people. I liked how family, again, is really important in this book specifically, but this book also says that if someone has really wronged you, you don't have to forgive that person. You don't have to forgive someone just because they're family. You don't have to subject yourself to the cruelties of family members just because they're family. Family only gets you so far, basically, and I really liked how that was in here. Family's worth fighting for, but there comes a point where it's not worth it anymore. And one other thing that I really loved about this was that it touches upon how you don't always have to be the one that gets the credit. You don't always have to be the one that's in the limelight, because you don't know exactly what other people are going through and how important it is to them. It might be just nice for you, it would mean the world to someone else. So I really liked that in here as well. I didn't really have any specific cons for this one. I think, again, that it is a little info dumpy, but I really like this book so much. So yeah, again, really enjoyed this one, but I don't think that I had any cons. Again, this is the one where it has the small detail of the shroud being unraveled, and it's retold in here with a different character. I love that. Next is The Titan's Curse. This is the 3rd book in the series. In this one, this is when the plot really starts to get going. The plot of the overall series is started in the first 2 books, but in this one is when the characters actually start to address the problem and start to actively work to fix it. In The Lightning Thief and in The Sea of Monsters, there are other problems that they're focused on in those books, but in this one, now is when the characters are really starting to ramp up and start to try to fix the big problem of this world. And so this book also has a lot of setting up for the next 2 books in the series. This one also has a bit of a shift in the series as well. In this book is when some of the characters start to form more romantic feelings for each other and everything like that. This book is a lot more angsty than the first 2 as well. So there's a little bit of a tonal shift as well as a shift in focus in this one. I do think that this book does a good job of setting up for the next 2 books in this series. I really like in this one that we spend a lot of time with Apollo and Artemis. I think Apollo in this is hilarious, so I really enjoyed seeing both him and his sister. You also get introduced to the Hunters of Artemis and everything like that, so there's a lot of fun things happening along with all of these different changes. And one last thing that I'll say about this book is that I really like how this book tackles that nothing lasts forever, the good and the bad. So if you're going through hard times, it's not going to last forever. Something that is good is not going to last forever. Life doesn't last forever. Little dark, but I love that in here. I also forgot to say that in The Titan's Curse, Nico is introduced, which is a lot of people's favorite character. So he is a little boy in this one, but in this one it focuses on Nico a lot because of the events of The Titan's Curse. This one also has a lot of myths focused on Daedalus because he created the Labyrinth, so you get a lot of those mythologies interwoven into this book. I really like that characters are introduced that are children of gods that are not the main 14. There's the 12 Olympian gods, then there's Hestia and Hades. This book has characters that are the children of minor gods, so I really liked that introduction into this series. Those characters were always in the background, and I like that they're kind of being brought to the forefront in here. I also liked the exploration of there being more complex reasons than good versus evil when it comes to choosing a side in a disagreement or in a war. A lot of the characters in here are having their black and white views challenged, and they have to confront that. And the characters realize that there are other reasons why characters choose one side or another. Because of the shift in the 3rd book, where characters are starting to have feelings for each other, the angst continues in this book. This book is a lot more angsty than I remember it being the first time I read it, but I didn't mind because it's Percy and Percabeth. But overall, I had a really good time while reading this one as well. I think that this one might be my favorite in the series. The first, the second, and this one are very close together in my mind for favorites. The last one is actually my least favorite, which is kind of weird. Some people are like, that is my favorite book, but the last one for me isn't as strong. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I'm going to tell you. Speaking of the last one, let's talk about The Last Olympian. This book is so action heavy. This book is one battle after another throughout the whole thing. The majority of this book is battle. I forgot how much of this book is taken up with the final battle or with the final series of battles. So I think that that's why it's my least favorite. I mean, I still rated it 5 stars, but of the 5 books, this one ended up being my least favorite just because there's not as much going on outside of these battles. I do, however, really like that this is a war, this is a battle, and some of the characters die. So I really like that, that the characters actually are in danger and do die. Some of the characters that I really like in this series die in this book, and it was hurting me again. And the last thing that I'll say about this one as well, just because I don't want to go into spoilers or anything like that in this video, again, let me know if you want a discussion video, is that I do like that this is very self-aware of what it's doing, because it is so battle heavy. One of the characters at the beginning of this book talks about how the Trojan War is happening again, and that's basically what this book is. It's just a lot of battles. It's very loose in terms of being like the Trojan War because a lot of the outcomes are changed, obviously, but there are a lot of things in here that are very similar to what happened in the Trojan War. So at least it's very self-aware, but it was just very battle heavy. But again, I still gave all these books 5 stars. So that's going to be my review on the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below which book is your favorite. Who's your favorite character? I really love all of them. Really, I just do love all of them. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below, and I will talk to you guys next time.